The Arizona Territory's sun beat down on the rough settlement of Bitter Springs with the kind of relentless heat that turned men mean and desperate. In the cramped, stifling back room of McGee's saloon, Silas Croft sat hunched over a poker table, watching his last few coins disappear into the pot with the resignation of a man who had long since stopped believing in luck. Across from him sat Clay Stone Murdoch, a man whose reputation preceded him like thunder before a storm. At 6'5", with shoulders like granite outcroppings and arms thick as fence posts, Clay was built like the mountains he called home. His torso showed the kind of defined musculature, a distinctive six-pack of abs, powerful chest, broad back, that came from years of hard physical labor, carving a homestead from unforgiving wilderness. His face was weathered by sun and wind, strong-featured with a square jaw and eyes the color of winter steel that missed nothing. People called him Stone, not just because of his surname, but because of his legendary stoicism and the way he seemed carved from the very rock of the mountains. He was known as a fair man, but dangerous when crossed, someone who kept to himself in his isolated homestead and came to town only when absolutely necessary. Today was one of those necessary days. Clay had come to collect a debt, $500 that Silas Croft had borrowed 6 months ago to stake a mining claim that had produced nothing but disappointment and deeper poverty. "I'm out," Silas said, throwing down his cards with shaking hands. "That's it. I got nothing left." "You've got the $500 you owe me," Clay said quietly, his deep voice carrying even in the noisy saloon. "I didn't come here to play cards, Croft. I came to collect what's mine." Silas's face flushed red with anger and shame. "I don't have it. You know I don't have it. The claim was worthless, everything's gone." "Then we have a problem," Clay interrupted, his tone still calm, but with an edge that made other men at nearby tables shift uncomfortably. "Because that was my money, honestly earned and honestly lent. I need it back." Silas's eyes took on a desperate, calculating gleam. "I got something else, something that might interest you." "I'm not interested in worthless mining claims or shares in failed ventures," Clay said flatly. "Not a claim. My daughter." Silas leaned forward, his voice dropping to something between a whisper and a snarl. "Eliza. She's 18, strong as an ox, can cook and clean and manage a household. Take her off my hands and we'll call the debt settled." The saloon went quiet. Every man present understood what Silas was proposing, selling his daughter like property to settle a gambling debt. It was the kind of thing that happened on the frontier more often than anyone liked to admit, but it was still shocking to hear it stated so baldly. Clay's expression didn't change, but something cold and dangerous flickered in his steel-gray eyes. "You're offering your daughter to settle a $500 debt." $500 is $500, Silas said with forced bravado. "And between you and me, Stone, you'd be doing me a favor. The girl's nothing but a disgrace, fat as a barn, eats more than she's worth, and no man would willingly take her anyway. At least this way she'd be off my hands and you'd have someone to cook and clean for you up in those mountains." Clay was silent for a long moment, studying Silas with an intensity that made the older man squirm. Finally, he spoke. "Bring her here, now. I want to hear what she has to say about this arrangement." Silas scurried off, returning 10 minutes later with his daughter in tow. Eliza Croft was indeed substantially overweight, perhaps 350 pounds, wearing a worn calico dress that strained at every seam. Her face was round and flushed with humiliation, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and her brown eyes were fixed firmly on the floor as her father pushed her forward. "Here she is," Silas announced loudly enough for half the saloon to hear. "My daughter Eliza. Like I said, she's fat and not much to look at, but she can work. You take her, and we'll call my debt paid in full." Eliza's face went scarlet, but she kept her eyes down and didn't speak. Clay could see her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her whole body rigid with shame and barely contained rage. Clay stood, his imposing height making Silas take an involuntary step backward. He addressed Eliza directly, ignoring her father entirely. "Miss Croft, your father is proposing to give you to me to settle his debt. Before I even consider such an arrangement, I need to know, is this something you want? Do you want to come with me, or would you prefer to stay here with your father?" Eliza's head snapped up, shock clear in her eyes. No one had asked her what she wanted. Not her father, not anyone in the saloon, not anyone in her entire miserable life. She looked at Clay Murdoch, this massive, intimidating stranger who everyone said was dangerous and unpredictable, and then at her father, whose face was already red with the beginnings of another drunken rage. She started, her voice barely a whisper. "I want to leave. I want to get away from here, from him." Clay nodded once decisively. "Then we have an agreement, but not the one your father proposed." He turned to Silas. "I'll take Eliza with me, and we'll consider your debt settled. But let me make something very clear. I'm not buying your daughter like livestock. I'm offering her employment and protection. She'll work as my housekeeper, she'll be treated with respect, and she'll have choices about her own life. If she wants to leave at any point, she's free to do so. Are we clear?" "Clear, clear," Silas said quickly, eager to be rid of both his daughter and his debt. "She's yours. Good riddance, I say. Here, take this fat disgrace away," Silas added loudly, gesturing toward Eliza with disgust. "Maybe you can make something useful out of her, because God knows I never could." Clay's jaw clenched with barely contained fury, but he forced himself to speak calmly. "Miss Croft, collect whatever belongings you have. We leave in 1 hour." The journey to Clay's homestead took 2 days. He'd purchased a sturdy mare for Eliza to ride, and he set a pace she could manage despite her clear inexperience with horses. During the ride, he learned pieces of her story. Her mother had died when Eliza was 10, leaving her with Silas and his increasingly severe drinking and gambling problems. He'd blamed Eliza for everything, for costing too much to feed, for being unmarriageable, for existing at all. He'd worked her like a servant, taken any money she managed to earn from occasional work for neighbors, and made it clear daily that she was nothing but a burden he resented. "He's been saying for years that I was a disgrace," Eliza said quietly on the second evening as they made camp. "That no man would ever want someone as fat and useless as me. I started to believe it, started to think maybe he was right." Clay was quiet for a moment, staring into the campfire. "My sister Sarah was built like you," he finally said. "Heavy set, people called it, and people treated her terribly because of it, made cruel jokes, excluded her, told her she was worthless. She believed them eventually, stopped eating, trying to make herself smaller, trying to become what people said she should be." His voice grew rough with old pain. "She died when she was 21, just gave up, stopped fighting, let herself waste away. I've always believed that if just one person had told her she had worth exactly as she was, if just one person had valued her for who she was instead of what she looked like, she might have lived. I couldn't save Sarah, but I can make sure no one else suffers the way she did. That's why I agreed to bring you away from your father, Eliza. Not because I'm getting a housekeeper, but because I saw in your eyes the same look Sarah had, the look of someone who's been told she's worthless so many times she's starting to believe it, and I'm here to tell you it's a lie. Eliza stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You don't even know me. How can you say I have worth? Because every person has worth, Clay said firmly. Your father is a fool who couldn't see past his own vices and failures. But I can see you clearly. You survived 18 years with a man who treated you like garbage, and you're still standing. That takes strength most people will never have. That's worth, Eliza. Real worth. Clay's homestead appeared on the third day, nestled in a protected valley with mountains rising on all sides. The main house was substantial, 2 rooms with a loft, built from logs Clay had hewn himself, with a stone chimney and glass windows that spoke of prosperity. There was a barn, a chicken coop, a vegetable garden, and outbuildings that showed years of careful planning and hard work. Welcome home, Clay said, helping Eliza down from her horse. The main bedroom is through that door. It's yours. I sleep in the loft. There's a lock on the bedroom door if you want privacy. The necessary is out back, and there's a good bathing spot by the stream when weather permits. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well maintained for a bachelor's dwelling. Clean, organized, with handmade furniture that showed real craftsmanship. Clay showed Eliza where supplies were kept, explained the daily routines, and made it clear that she was free to organize things as she saw fit. I meant what I said back in Bitter Springs, Clay said after the tour. This is employment, not servitude. You'll work because that's how we both survive out here, but you'll be treated with respect and fairness. I need to make one more thing clear, though. I'm proposing we make this arrangement legal through marriage. Eliza's eyes widened with shock. Marriage? But I thought, I need a partner, Clay interrupted. Not a decoration, not a servant, but a partner. Someone to help manage this homestead while I handle the heavy labor and the livestock. Someone to share the work and the profits. A marriage in name would give you legal protection, give you half ownership of this property, and make sure no one, including your father, can ever claim you as property again. But it would be a practical arrangement. I'm not expecting romance or anything like that. Just partnership and mutual respect. What do you say? Eliza looked around the cabin, at the warm, clean space that was such a stark contrast to the squalor she'd lived in with her father. She looked at Clay, this intimidating, powerful man who somehow saw her as something other than a burden, and she made a decision. Yes, she said, yes, I'll marry you. They married quietly the following week, with a circuit preacher performing the ceremony and Clay's nearest neighbors, an elderly couple named the Hendersons who lived 5 miles away, serving as witnesses. When Clay slipped the ring onto Eliza's finger and spoke his vows with quiet conviction, she felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, her life could be something other than endless humiliation and hardship. Over the following months, Eliza discovered that Clay Murdoch was a man of his word in every way. He treated her with consistent respect, never commented on her size or eating habits, never made her feel ashamed or inadequate. He taught her the skills she needed for mountain living: how to preserve food, how to manage livestock, how to shoot a rifle for hunting and protection. He consulted her on decisions about the homestead, valued her opinions, and treated her as the partner he'd promised she would be. Eliza, for her part, proved to be remarkably capable. She managed the household with efficiency, cooked meals that were infinitely better than Clay's bachelor fare, and showed a natural talent for organization that made the entire operation run more smoothly. Her size, which she'd always been taught to see as a weakness, proved to be an asset. She was strong, able to haul heavy loads and work long hours without complaint. Between them, a friendship gradually developed. They talked in the evenings after the work was done, sharing stories from their pasts and slowly learning to trust each other. Clay told Eliza about his years as a soldier, about the violence he'd seen and participated in, about his decision to retreat to the mountains to find peace. Eliza talked about her mother, about the happy early childhood before her mother's death, about the gradual erosion of her self-worth under her father's constant criticism. One evening, about 4 months after their marriage, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Clay spoke quietly. "Eliza, I need to tell you something. When I married you, I told myself it was just a practical arrangement, a partnership for mutual benefit. But that's not entirely true anymore." Eliza looked at him, her heart racing. "The truth is, I've fallen in love with you," Clay continued, his voice rough with vulnerability. "Not because you're convenient or useful, though you're both, but because of who you are, your strength, your kindness, despite everything you've been through, your intelligence, your laugh that I hear more and more often these days. I love you, Eliza, and I'm hoping you might feel the same." "I do," Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've been falling in love with you for months. I just didn't dare hope you could feel that way about me." Clay pulled her close, his strong arms gentle as they wrapped around her. "I feel that way about you because you're remarkable. Your father was a blind fool who couldn't see your worth. But I see it. I see you, Eliza, all of you, and I love every part of what I see." Their peaceful life was shattered 6 weeks later when 3 men rode up to the homestead. The leader was a hard-looking character named Flint, who worked as a collector for various creditors throughout the territory. The other 2 were clearly hired muscle, hands never far from their guns. "Clay Murdoch," Flint called out, "also known as Stone, I'm here on behalf of Silas Croft. Seems there's some confusion about a debt settlement." Clay stepped out onto the porch, his rifle held casually but ready. "No confusion. Croft's debt was settled when I took responsibility for his daughter. We have an agreement, properly witnessed." "Ah, but here's the thing," Flint said with an ugly smile. "Croft's racked up new debts since then, big ones, and he's claiming that the girl, Eliza, is it, should rightfully be his to use as collateral again, seeing as how you just borrowed her temporary-like for that first debt. He says she's still his property, and he wants her back." "Eliza is my wife," Clay said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Legally married, with a certificate and witnesses. She's not property, and she's certainly not Croft's to gamble with. So you can ride back and tell him to find another way to settle his debts." "That's not going to work for us," Flint said. "We've got a legitimate claim here. Either you hand over the girl, or we'll have to take her by force. Your choice. Third option, Clay said. You leave my property right now, or I shoot you for trespassing and attempted kidnapping. I'm giving you to the count of 3. The 2 hired guns shifted nervously. Everyone in the territory knew Stone Murdoch's reputation. He wasn't a man who made idle threats, and he was rumored to be one of the fastest and most accurate shots in Arizona. 1, Clay said, his rifle coming up. Now hold on. Flint started. 2. The hired guns were already turning their horses. This ain't worth dying for, one muttered. Let's go. Flint, seeing his backup evaporating, cursed and followed them. This isn't over, Murdoch. Croft's got legal standing. 3, Clay said, and fired a shot that kicked up dirt inches from Flint's horse's feet, sending the animal into a panicked gallop that carried its rider away at high speed. After they left, Clay found Eliza standing in the doorway, her face pale, but her hands steady. They'll come back, she said quietly. My father will find another way to use me to settle his debts. He always does. No, he won't, Clay said firmly, because I'm riding into Bitter Springs tomorrow and settling every debt Silas Croft has. Every last one. When I'm done, he'll have nothing to use you for. You'll be free of him completely and permanently. Clay, you can't. That could be hundreds of dollars, maybe more than 1,000. I don't care, Clay interrupted. I've got savings from my years before coming here. Money I've never touched because I never had a reason to spend it. Now I do. You're my wife, Eliza, my partner, the woman I love. Protecting you is worth every penny I have. True to his word, Clay rode into Bitter Springs the next day and methodically tracked down every person Silas Croft owed money to. By the end of the week, he'd paid off $1,100 in gambling debts, bar tabs, and loans. He also paid the local judge to draw up legal documents, making it crystal clear that Silas Croft had no claim whatsoever on his daughter, that Eliza Murdoch was a legally married woman whose husband had assumed all previous debts and obligations. When Clay returned to the homestead, Eliza ran to meet him, throwing herself into his arms with a force that nearly knocked him over, despite his size. I'm free, she sobbed. I'm really, truly free of him. You are? Clay confirmed, holding her tight. He has no power over you anymore. No one does except you. You're free to make your own choices, live your own life, be your own person. That night, their marriage became a true marriage in every sense. Eliza finally allowed herself to believe that Clay truly found her desirable and beautiful, while Clay showed her with tender passion that her worth had never been determined by her size, but by her character, courage, and capacity to love despite years of abuse. Months later, as they worked side by side building an addition to the house, they needed more space for the family they hoped to have. Eliza reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. Do you remember what my father said that day in the saloon? She asked Clay. When he called me a fat disgrace and told you to take me away? I remember wanting to break his jaw for it, Clay said honestly. Those words could have defined my entire life, Eliza said. Could have been my epitaph. But instead, they became the start of the best chapter of my life. Because they brought me to you, to this place, to understanding that I was never the problem. Cruel people were the problem. Clay set down his hammer and pulled her into his arms, heedless of the sawdust and sweat. Your father was the disgrace, not you. You're the woman who survived his cruelty and came out stronger. The woman who learned to see her own worth despite years of being told she was worthless. The woman who has the courage to love despite being taught that no one could ever love her. You're everything, Eliza, everything I need, everything I want, everything I'll spend the rest of my life protecting and cherishing. As the sun set over their mountain valley and the house they were building together took shape beneath their hands, Eliza and Clay held each other and counted their blessings. What had started with the cruelest transaction, a father selling his daughter as a disgrace to settle gambling debts, had become the foundation of a love story that proved worth was never determined by appearance, but always by the courage to survive, the strength to hope, and the wisdom to recognize love when it was offered, even in the most unexpected circumstances. The father who had tried to rid himself of his fat disgrace of a daughter died alone and unmourned 3 years later, his debts finally consuming him completely. But Eliza and Clay Murdoch built a legacy that lasted for generations, a family that valued character over appearance, compassion over cruelty, and partnership over power. And every person who heard their story understood the truth, that Clay Stone Murdoch hadn't saved Eliza that day in the saloon. They had saved each other, two wounded people who found healing, hope, and home in each other's arms.